Tony Kinnett.
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 Host of the Tony Kinnett Cast.
Let's get down to business.
You're listening to the Tony Kinnett Cast on 93 WYPC.
WCYTV.
Here on the Daily Signal.
Hey, welcome back to the Tony Kinnett Cast here on the Daily Signal. It's good to be with you this fine Friday as we head into what is very likely one of the greatest political comeback moments in American history. And we're going to get into that in just a couple of seconds. But first, we are going to bring on one of the best guys, at least in the business, when it comes to this very fine work of journalism, because there is a CNN defamation lawsuit that I must say is really unlike anything that I've seen yet. Obviously, we've seen ABC News and a couple of others so far this year that have gone through, well, let's just say some very well-deserved criticism for some of the things that they have put individuals through. And whether it's ABC, whether it's CNN, whether it's the Associated Press, there's been a lot more scrutiny on the legacy press in and of itself, as there should be, by the way. So we're going to be heading over to Nick Fondacaro here in just a second, just getting him set up just a second more. And it looks like we've got it working here on our end now. Let's flip over to him then. All right, there we go. Nick, can you hear us all right?
Yes, I can. My apologies for that. Having a little bit of technical difficulties sort of on the fly here.
Hey, I understand. Thanks for being able to join us right after a critical court case. Obviously, you've been really duking it out with CNN, with Jake Tapper, over an investigation into defamation of a veteran. Tell us a little bit about the case and what was going on to set this whole thing up.
So basically, the reason why Mr. Young ended up suing CNN for defamation is because they went after him. He was helping get women and children out of Afghanistan, and they didn't like that his company, Nemex, was making money off of it. Like, they have to, pay the other operators in the country. They have said they are very trained personnel, people putting their lives on the line. Using their networks and stuff like it. So it costs money, the same sort of prices that nonprofits were doing to help get people out of Afghanistan, like the nonprofits like AA21 and all of that. And basically what we were seeing is them going after him. They didn't like it. They were framing things in sort of these moral gray zones, or just say, like, going after him morally, saying it's wrong for you to do this, and imposing their morality on him. And that's where we sort of get these comments that he's an S-word, MFer, all this other stuff. And then it showed actual malice, the jury found, and that CNN should be punished, and they are now forever known for defaming him.
And that's really the key, because we brought you on, I believe, when this lawsuit was kind of in its, I don't want to say its infancy, but just a bit ago, talking to a little bit about how CNN had gotten away for a long time, or gotten away with the idea of, as long as, here and there, everywhere, people just kind of shove things under the table, and as long as we all pretend that CNN is an extremely super duper reputable organization that would never engage in any kind of scrutiny whatsoever for any reason at all, then they could just get away with saying whatever it is, including the kind of not just moralization, but demoralization of this particular veteran. It's kind of the same thing we saw in the Nicholas Sandmann case, and that took you to the courtroom, and that's kind of where we left you off. So tell us about the courtroom. I know that Tapper zoomed in at one point. They tried to get the case dismissed. Tell us a little bit what happened as you guys were duking this one out.
So the Tapper video was a video deposition that he did back in November. And basically he was being deposed on financial discovery not facts discovery. And he was basically making these really strange claims that you would think that a host of a show would know. Like, he doesn't know his title, like his official title at the network, which we all, like, a lot of us have had instances or interactions with Tapper about his fragile ego. So the fact that he doesn't know his title is laughable.
Yeah, strange for sure.
Mm-hmm. He says he doesn't follow ratings, but Peter Hassan found tweets of him praising his ratings. So like, that seems to be him lying under oath about not caring about the ratings. So that seems to be probably an own separate issue. But yeah, so he tried to get in there, and in the court, the jury did not seem to buy at all a lot of these questions or these claims from CNN, where they're jury questions in Florida. In Florida, the jury can ask questions. They were really going after him, like being like, do you think people are obliged to talk to you? Which was basically the tone and tenor that Marquardt and Katie Bo-Lillis had with talking to him, where Marquardt in his messages, where he's like, oh, he doesn't want to talk to us. That's suspicious.
One of the things that struck me, especially in Tapper's video, was how much scorn he, and also, by the way, the guys arguing the case on behalf of CNN, just how much scorn they had for everyone there. It was really weird. I mean, more so that you'd think that in a court environment that one would be respectful, that one might be deferential, but the kind of, we shouldn't have to put up with this, we're seeing it, dismiss the case, and then when Tapper was pressed, well, you can think that if you want to, was what he said at one point. That was just so strange. It wasn't arguing, this is what I believe, this is what I don't believe. It was like, how dare you even speak to me? Don't you know who I am? I'm Jake Tapper of the Cable News Network. It was just, I mean, again, they ended up paying the price for it, literally. But I mean, just as a guy who does a lot of media research like I do, this is our thing, our shtick. We get out there and we call journalists, pundits, and hosts out on the carpet. Have you ever seen that kind of flippancy out of, I don't know, like a Matlock episode?
Absolutely not. Because like, one of the things that came across in the jury questions, and definitely in the attitude that Marquardt and Bo-Lillis had, and especially a lot of the editors, Fuzz Hogan and Adam Levine in particular, was they're sort of like, they were not sorry. They made, like, the jurors asked them, counsel asked them, are you sorry? And none of them were sorry. And they all said, we would run this story again. We would do this again. And that's why CNN needed to be punished. CNN needed to pay a literal price, $5 million, $4 million for economic, $1 million for emotional. I know a lot of people are sort of disappointed with those numbers, but it is what the jury decided, and in the end, it did provoke a settlement. Like, it did seem like the fact that CNN wanted, I would say, is sort of signs that they were afraid of what punitive could do. Yep, that's exactly where I was going to take it next. So please go ahead. It was good that you came to the conclusion that, I guess as far as an outsider trying to read this and see where things are going, that if CNN is getting kind of twitchy, again, given ABC News and other outlets that have had to back off lately on claims, we could be seeing maybe a new mode of operations, even if in the courtroom they're saying, we would run this again, we would do it all over. Yeah, they released a statement on this too. It's like, we're 100% committed to journalism, like facts and all that jazz that they claim. But obviously they're not, because you're a defamer. You defamed him. Like, it is now official. Like, I know, like, a lot of people were throwing around stuff for like Fox and stuff like that. But in this case, like, the jury ruled that there is defamation, right? So you have, like, the jury said, defamation happened, you must award him damages, and you must be punished. You guys acted with a level of malice that is noticeable and is factual. Objectively definable and quantifiable. Yes. Exactly. Exactly. That moves me into kind of the next step here, which is when we get into the conversations about after a company makes kinds of decisions where, again, whether it was CNN, whether it was ABC, whether it was MSNBC, whether it was the Associated Press, whether it was the Washington Post or the New York Times, I go on and on and on. When you have cases like this in which there are defamation, and by the way, defamation cases are not uncommon with outlets. They come around all the time. Anytime there is any kind of a piece that is unfavorable towards a person, they pop up. But the question immediately becomes,
how does your organization and those involved with your organization carry themselves? Jim Acosta was out like just yesterday, patting himself on the back, or maybe 2 nights ago, saying how great CNN was, and the fact checkers are gone, but they're still here, and all other kinds of manners of just self-love, to put it mildly. Do you sense a tonal shift possibly coming from these larger organizations in the next couple of years, or is the love fest and narcissus going to continue as residents?
I think the narcissism is going to continue. There needs to be more cases like this brought against these types of media organizations, especially. It's like, dude, they know they're in court and that the jury is looking like I'm reporting it, other places are reporting, the streams are going all over the place. Like, the judge was yelling at your lawyer, like, because he was lying, and the judge himself said, you have no credibility, like, your credibility is almost zero with me. And basically, it's like CNN basically hired a lawyer that's perfect for them in like almost every way here. And I'm gonna probably say this for the first here because it's been sort of said other places, but I spoke up during the hearing there because the CNN wanted to bring somebody on the stand, and they claimed they spoke with the entire media pool, that they weren't going to show the guy's face for certain security reasons. But he never talked to me. He didn't talk to all the reporters. He only talked to a couple of them. And I raised my hand and I spoke out to the judge and said, no, he did not. He is misleading that he is not. He didn't talk to all of us. Like, we're the pool reporters there. Like, we would like to see that this is an important case for the American people. It's American public interest.
It's a really bold. It's a really bold move on their part, but that wasn't the only thing. I believe that the CNN legal team also tried to make the case that because certain things weren't in print and in articles on their own, and I might be misconstruing this, so you might have to help me pick up the pieces. But because something wasn't shown in video, it wasn't relative to the case. And I think that you made the counter that, well, it's CNN, all of their stuff is on video. Like, what are you talking about?
Yeah, I'm a little bit. Can you repeat that question? Like,
I guess there was one moment during this case in which I recall from your tweets, from one of the posts from some of our colleagues, like the Free Beacon reporters, that CNN tried to make the case, and it was shot down, that because certain elements of this defamation, like, they only wanted written evidence, like no video evidence, to be played in the court or something like that. And you fired back that, wait a minute, at CNN, like, most of their stuff is video.
Yeah, I think I know what you're saying there, because there was a sort of a dust up in the court. They were originally just going to show the main segment that aired on the lead. What ended up coming in later, because it was only just discovered, I believe it was Brian Flood over at Fox News who went and found the teasers leading up to this, where a lot of that same language about black markets, exploiting desperate Afghans, and a lot of that defamatory material was said, was a lot of it sprinkled out through the teasers. I think it might have been like 2 or 3 teasers before it. So it was really setting the tone for this all through it. And they didn't want that extra, they didn't want those teasers shown, because it really showed how much more of that defamation material there was, defamatory material, which honestly, they could not have, like, they didn't want that, but they also had all the videos of, I believe it was like 7, I think they showed 6, but there was like over like 11 different shows, or like they played it several different times throughout different shows, CNN domestic, CNN international. So like, he was defamed like all over the world.
Right. And again, the ways that the CNN legal team, and as you know, I'm not claiming that this broke so fast today. I had to refresh as quick as I could since our last interview, when you were like right in the thick of it. And to see, again, another legacy outlet that has preened and bragged about how important and wonderful and spotless and sinless and perfect they are, to yet again be guilty of defamation in the same classic style with the same classic garbage. I cannot praise you and your team enough. I've said it online. It really, what your team has done is worth a bucket of Pulitzers in this case.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate the praise. But it was my cameraman came down here with me to help me do interviews with Zach and Mr. Young and Friedman. He came here. He's a big help for me. The other people in the press pool, they technically weren't part of my team. We were all there covering it together. Joey Wilson, Jessica, we were all there representing our own organizations, but we were all doing this together, covering different things, leaning on each other. Oh, what was so and so's name? How do you spell that? Did you catch this? Who said this? Double checking with each other. It was my first real experience working in a pool like that with different organizations, and how we can all come together to sort of just help each other's product is amazing.
And with a target like CNN, how can that not bring everyone together? Nick Fondacaro from the Media Research Center, always a blast to have you on. Appreciate it, and we'll be looking forward to seeing some of the stuff you're up to real soon.
Thanks for having me on, and again, sorry for the technical difficulties.
Hey, that's part of it.
Mm-hmm.
All right, that brings us over to some of the quick news that we need to dig into rather quickly here. First on the list is the 28th Amendment to the United States Constitution. Now, those of you who are congressional scholars out there may say, hang on a second there, Tony. There aren't 28 amendments to the U.S. Constitution. What are you talking about? Well, according to the dementia-ridden Joe Biden, the commander-in-chief, the president of the United States, for just a few more hours, the 28th Amendment of the United States is real, and he declared it today, like Michael Scott declaring bankruptcy, as a law of the land. Now, hang on. I know that when before we've said Joe Biden did this thing, it can make it sound like because he has aggressive dementia and because he was never that brilliant to begin with, that maybe he just misspoke. And like when he mixed up the presidents of Egypt and Mexico. And so then we made hay about it because he's mentally unfit to be president of the United States. That we realized that the United States had not actually started addressing the president of Mexico as the president of Egypt. However, when I say that Biden literally tried to enact the 28th Amendment to the Constitution today, I mean, that is straight up 100% what happened. Here, take a look.
Today, I affirm the Equal Rights Amendment to have cleared all the necessary hurdles to be added to the U.S. Constitution now. The Equal Rights Amendment is the law of the land now. It's the 28th Amendment to the Constitution now.
Now, folks, that's just insane. And there are a couple of reasons that that's insane. First of all, to ratify an amendment to the Constitution, it has to pass Congress. It then has to be signed by the president. And then it has to go to the states for ratification. And by the way, as this is so humiliating to both Biden and Kamala Harris, who we'll get to in just a second here, the Biden administration was so deeply incorrect in this I don't know, argument, claim, whatever you want to call it, about the 28th Amendment, this Equal Rights Amendment, that the actual National Archives issued a press release today. Dr. Colleen Shogan and then Deputy Archivist William J. Basenko released the following statement today on the Equal Rights Amendment and the constitutional responsibilities for administering its ratification process. Quote, as archivist and deputy archivist of the United States, it's our responsibility to uphold the integrity of the constitutional amendment process and ensure that changes to the Constitution are carried out in accordance with the law. At this time, the Equal Rights Amendment, ERA, cannot be certified as part of the Constitution due to established legal, judicial, and procedural decisions. And there are a multitude of reasons you can't just snap a constitutional amendment into law. Literally why the Constitution and its amendment structure are set up how they are. These are far harder to get through than just a law being passed by Congress or a regulation being forwarded by an administrative agency or an executive order by the president. an amendment to the Constitution changes the very fabric of the United States itself. And now, this is probably the most egregious thing here. Not only did the amendment not get ratified in the way that any amendment of the United States Constitution must be ratified, but even specified in the Equal Rights Amendment itself, it didn't even meet those terms for the base number of states. There was a deadline that was placed in the bill itself that said, by this date, this number of states need to ratify it. This is what the archivist outlines. In 2020 and again in 2022, the Office of Legal Counsel in the U.S. DOJ affirmed that the ratification deadline established by Congress for the ERA is valid and enforceable. What this means is that if you want to extend some deadline for far more states to start ratifying this amendment, which, by the way, Biden does not have the number of states necessary to ratify the 28th Amendment to the United States Constitution, Kamala Harris also had to dig in, which it's become standard practice in American society and the American political system for any outgoing administration to try to do what he can, because a lot of work in modern presidencies is just passing executive orders and regulations, which the incoming president can just reverse on a dime. Remember, half of the illegal immigration crisis that we are facing right now as a nation comes from Biden on day one bragging about all of these executive orders that he was reversing from Donald Trump. So now Joe Biden on his way out is trying to do as much as he can to keep Trump from doing what he wants to do. So he's banned a lot of offshore drilling areas. He's also established national parks that aren't national parks, literally places where individuals would go to, like in the middle of the desert, to search for natural gas and oil. Biden has slapped up some national parks so that they actually can't be responsibly sought through for oil and natural gas resources. The weirdest, insane thing by far, though, is this 28th Amendment. Kamala Harris did the same thing today. She says, the Equal Rights Amendment is the 28th Amendment, and it is the law of the land. And she then basically puts out this entire statement about history teaches us that the civil rights are fought for and won in every generation. She started talking about the significance and the times and the whatever. And it is just so far out there from what, even at least from where I'm at, that Democrats would even be able to do from the House or the Senate in, for example, changing precedent or procedure in order to one-up each other, right? So there are a series of established precedent on how many individuals are needed to pass this kind of a law or to appoint this kind of a person to an office. So, for example, there used to be a standard in which you needed 60% of the Senate to appoint someone to a position. Well, then the Senate Democrats under Harry Reid made a decision, because they didn't have enough people to get some of the Obama appointees through, that they were going to invoke the nuclear option, meaning that you only need 51 out of 100 votes in order to get someone through the Senate, and then that person would be appointed. And one of my favorite quotes to play on the show was Mitch McConnell. And Mitch McConnell saying very, very clearly, if you do this, you're going to regret it. I maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow.
Say to my friends on the other side of the aisle, you'll regret this, and you may regret it a lot sooner than you think.
And they did, because now Trump is actually getting his appointees through on the nuclear option. You can change precedent, all right? Things that aren't clearly established in the Constitution, things that aren't clearly established in law. You can do a lot of things in rules committees. You can do a lot of things in kind of procedure. If all you have is a simple majority, you can kind of get around some stuff. Amendments to the United States Constitution are not part of those. No. So Biden tried to get it out. Again, I know that you heard him talking semi-lucidly in front of a cheering crowd. Biden said, I have supported the Equal Rights Amendment for more than 50 years, and I have long been clear that no one should be discriminated against based on their sex. By the way, currently already established on the books. You don't need a constitutional amendment for this. It's grandstanding. There's also some very weird, nonsensical stuff in this amendment. And so then Biden tries to claim that on January 27th, 2020, the Commonwealth of Virginia became the 38th state to ratify the Equal Rights Amendment. The American Bar Association has recognized that the Equal Rights Amendment has cleared all the necessary hurdles to be formally added to the Constitution. The American Bar Association does not decide if an amendment has passed the number of requirements in order to become an official amendment of the U.S. Constitution. That's not a thing. So allow me to put this in very, very, very basic terms. Imagine just for a moment that tomorrow, whatever, you decided that, you were going to take a trip with your family across the country. You're going to drive out and see Yellowstone National Park. And you were, getting out on the road. Your car's in really good condition. Nothing wrong with it. It totally fits all of the various, things that would be expected. The DMV is totally fine with it being on the road. You're in the car, family's in the car, everyone is nice and safe. And then all of the sudden, your driver's ed instructor bursts out of the woods and says, "Hey, you're not prepared to drive. You can't make this cross-country trip." And you'd be like, what authority do you have, now that I already have my driver's license, to tell me where I can and can't go in my car? What are you talking about? That's the American Bar Association here. The Licensure Association for Lawyers and for certain levels of prosecution justices and certain precedent in courtrooms does not have authority over the U.S. Constitution. The left's obsession, deep, passionate obsession with putting random agencies in charge of every aspect of our life is so pathetic that there isn't even a good argument in this case. It is laughable. It should be laughed at. When people try to tell you that Biden's administration was a success, you don't even have to point to the massive economic failure, although you should. You don't have to point to the massive illegal immigration failure, although you should. You don't have to point to the Afghanistan failure, although you should. You don't have to point to that enabling Russia to march into Ukraine, although you should. You don't have to point to his team saying that the Middle East was perfectly safe the day before October the 7th happened, although you should. All you have to do is point to Joseph Robinette Biden, who brags about being a constitutional law professor, even though all he taught was a weekend seminar for 0 credits or grade weight, like a club activity at the University of Delaware, which very corruptly worked with his family for a very long time. A little under-the-table nonsense. That Joe Biden, constitutional professor lawman, has been rebuked by the Supreme Court 2 or 3 times just for trying to forgive student loan, which he has no authority to do. The executive branch of government has no authority to do. Or the president of the United States announcing that Ukraine is suddenly free from paying back any debt from the material and the money that we've loaned them in this war. He has no authority to do that either. Reminder, FDR had to get a Lend-Lease Act passed by both houses of Congress in order to get money and material sent in World War II. Biden doesn't just get to suddenly start changing things like a flavor of ice cream at a Baskin-Robbins. That's not how that works. And so when you look at Joe Biden and his entire staff, Kamala Harris, of course, right behind her, the lady who wanted to give black men only business loans, which violates the Civil Rights Act. It really is not bewildering at all. When you look at the Senate Democrats, when you look at Gavin Newsom in California, Pritzker in Illinois, when you look at Biden and his entire administration, it's really not that difficult to ascertain why the American public resolutely backhanded Joe Biden in the polls leading up to being swapped out for Kamala Harris. It's insane the level of civics that it takes to understand how ratifying an amendment to the U.S. Constitution works. In Indiana, at least, as a former public school teacher, kids had to know that by the end of like 4th or 5th grade. I'm just befuddled by that one, folks. That is going to take me a couple of days to get over. This is the President of the United States has more authority to randomly declare that a new piece of land or a contested piece of land is a part of this country. He could do that 50 times over before a president would even have the relative ballpark estimate of ease at suggesting whether a constitutional amendment is or isn't viable. Goodness gracious. So that brings us over to the TikTok ban, because the Supreme Court of the United States has enforced the TikTok ban. And this is where we need to have a little bit of a one-to-one conversation here, because I've seen a lot of people suggesting a very weird false binary, that the TikTok app, which, by the way, in its code very openly links to the Communist Chinese Party, which is using TikTok to collect location data, to collect personal information, to collect financial data, to collect things like your fingerprints and possibly face and retinal scans, much like RedNote, the other Chinese app that a lot of people are running to now. And just for the record, the communist government of China directly influences this app. So Congress and the Supreme Court, again, this is the objective fact so far, that the Supreme Court and Congress and the president, so all three branches of government, have agreed by the proper measures set up in our Constitution, the one with 27 amendments, that TikTok is totally allowed to still be a thing, but the company who owns it, ByteDance, has to divest from China. Which, by the way, I thought that a lot of individuals were kind of against foreign companies operating on U.S. soil. I seem to remember that from just a couple of days ago. But the problem is that, first of all, ByteDance and the Chinese Communist Party don't want to do that. Because, again, the algorithm that is set forward, not for just 18-year-olds and above who are using the app as at all, but like for teenagers who are using this app, are being fed an algorithm filled with LGBTQ plus nonsense, very harmful transgender garbage, and a lot of other anti-American garbage that in reality is really a kind of Chinese espionage against the American culture and shoving it further down. So China doesn't want to stop doing that. Now, the problem is that a lot of Americans enjoy using the app. I had Vine. I didn't get the bit.ly bit.ly or whatever that came after Vine was shut down. I looked around on TikTok for a couple of days, and I use Instagram Reels. Short form video apps, I get it, absolutely. But there are a lot of people that are making the case that because a lot of people like using it, that to limit this app's ability to be controlled by China is somehow an infringement of free speech. That's not how that works. That's not at all how that works. It just isn't. Now, the false binary that's been put forward, which is probably one of the least well-reasoned arguments I've heard in a very long time, is that because the United States government and the federal agencies like the FBI colluded with Facebook, Meta, Instagram, and Twitter at the time, and colluded with these organizations to suppress information, to suppress news stories, for example, about Hunter Biden, about COVID-19 and the vaccines, or the kind of data collection that the NSA has been found to do that. Because the United States does it, therefore, hey, the United States has no right to tell anybody what app they can or can't use. Guys, foreign threats are different than domestic threats. And just because one is bad does not make the other one right. Either way. Either way. Just because the United States government sucks does not mean that the Chinese government is good. And the number of individuals out there that are claiming that, whoa, this Chinese app is really fantastic. I'm sorry, when did everyone become Bernie Sanders all of a sudden, who had this weird incestuous love for the Soviet Union? Because he's like, oh, things are so clean over here and there's so much order. And I go over here and everyone is very nice to me, and then we salute the premier, and then we go read Mao's little red book. It is very good. What are people, what is this? The reality that people don't really want to come to terms with, and I'm going to lay it out for you right here, is that there are a lot of influencers who have a lot of subscribers and followers over on TikTok. And they really don't want to lose that following. And if they lose TikTok because ByteDance is too stubborn to give it up, guess what? They lose their following. They didn't diversify to other social media platforms. They stayed on TikTok. The idea that people think that they have some kind of a right to be manipulated by a foreign government in an attack against the United States is truly bewildering. Foreign companies can take a flying leap. If Toyota did something that was negatively impacting Americans, Toyota should not be allowed to operate in the United States. If Renault, the French car company that's horrible, was amazing, then I would be okay with them operating here in the United States. You know what? Chinese concrete and steel companies, the ones where they pour gallons upon gallons and gallons of concrete and no rebar, shouldn't be allowed to operate in the United States. There's not really a place for arguing here. Oh, you like TikTok? That's great. There's a lot of things that I'm sure that we would like, that because another country is doing it and doing it poorly, does not automatically mean that, oh, well, yeah, we should, of course, let all of our teenagers access this completely. Why? I have yet to see a single good argument so far at all about why TikTok needs to be allowed to remain as it is. By the way, if TikTok wasn't owned by China, sure, have at it. I haven't seen a single person. I know I'm not the first pundit to make that case. I have not seen a single individual here, there, everywhere at all that has said that if TikTok was not owned by a direct Chinese company, by the CCP, with code very clearly indicating backdoors to the Chinese Communist government in Beijing. Again, that is so wild to me. Then if that was owned by an American company, yeah, sure, I wouldn't mind at all. Sure, go for it. If it was owned by an American company, I'd probably make an account and start posting a lot of my stuff over there. Makes a lot of sense. In other news, Joy Reid is having a time. There's a lot of issues with joys in the world, I must unfortunately bring to your attention. First of all, Joy Reid is from MSNBC, who's normally known for her amazing takes on just blatant racial discrimination. Apparently saying that the election was stolen, the whole insane thing that I was told we were not allowed to do, or, we would instantly be sentenced to the political gulag for saying that an election was stolen. Well, here's Joy Reid giving it the old 1-2.
They're even talking about like stealing an election. And it's making me rethink whether I do believe like election machines can be hacked. Because I've always been like, you can't hack the election machines, but they're like convincing me, I don't know, maybe you can. I don't know.
I mean, to me, in this world, anything is possible.
Anything is possible.
There are all these conspiracy theories out there about Trump and whether or not they cheated. I know you say that they didn't, but I know you kind of have to.
Wait a minute. I didn't say they didn't. What I said is there is a rational explanation for why Kamala Harris could have lost those swing states and Trump won them. There's a way you can get to those numbers with people staying home.
There's a rational reason for why Kamala Harris lost the swing states. Oh, okay, boys and girls. If we really put our heads together and we just really think it through and really just put in the extra time and the extra work here, I think that we can figure out why Kamala Harris might just maybe have lost the swing states. I'm eager to hear that. Continue, Joy, please.
Or only voting for Trump and not the rest of the ballot. I'm saying there's a history of that. However,
let me hear it, because what
I will say is there was absolute voter suppression that took place, and I consider that cheating. If you think about the voter law in your state of Georgia, that law is anti-voter. When you have bomb threats only in Fulton County, we don't know how many people stayed home out of fear because of the bomb threats in Fulton County.
Okay, so first of all, there is no law in Georgia that forbids someone from voting. The one that she's talking about means that people aren't allowed to go through the voter lines in Georgia and pass out snacks and water and things with campaign information on them, because that's voter manipulation. That's not voter suppression. They say, well, that's racially discriminatory. What, because a black person can't bring a bottle of water with them to the polls? Are you okay? Well, it's Joy Reid. Not a lot of joy in Joy Reid. Well, speaking of joys, over on Fox Sports, I think FS1, Joy Taylor has decided the end of the United States is at hand. So Joy Taylor, who is probably one of the least competent sports commentators I've ever listened to, who I would very much enjoy seeing thrown out of a window by Shaquille O'Neal. Joy Taylor giving us all a little doomsday greeting here.
The great dynasties, including Tom Brady and the Patriots, you have to be in that conversation. But it hasn't started yet.
Don't listen to Joy, y'all. Started.
I mean, yeah, you can talk nonsense if you want to. It's a free country for a couple more days.
No.
Coming up, Dak Prescott balled out.
Can we just have sports without the politics, please? I'm really looking. One of the reasons I love college sports that I really cannot stand. I really can't stand watching the NFL. I can't really stand watching the NBA. I'll take college football and basketball any day of the week, all day on repeat, because somehow between the raw athletic competition of college sports, moving up to the professional sport level, the professionals have way too much time on their hand because they're that good, and they don't make the field bigger. They don't raise the baskets up higher. They don't actually make the game more challenging. So with all this spare time, what do the professionals have to do? Well, suddenly got to talk about politics, and the commentators got to talk about politics. No one care. I don't care what Anne Hathaway has to say about politics. I don't care what Joy Taylor has to say about politics. Leave the politics to the pundits. Just saying, we have channels for that. You don't see me, telling you that you read Tom Brady about as well as Helen Keller read billboards. Again, this is why I watch college sports. I don't have to put up with that level of nonsense. And speaking of college sports, go Irish. Because at least if I'm going to be extremely disappointed by Indiana University's basketball programs, which is the team I support for basketball, at least the football team I support can do well. Because, come on now. We're going to be back in just a moment, chat a little with Scott Perry, representative from Pennsylvania's 10th. It's time to talk about how we're actually going to get the 119th Congress to move a couple of things forward for real, not just talking about it on the campaign trail. Stick around. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast here on the Daily Signal.
It's the Tony Kinnett Cast on 93 WIBC.
Feels like I'm losing it.
Understands the soft promises and dodgy garbage for those of us in the Rust Belt, like Representative Scott Perry. He's from Pennsylvania's 10th, and he is ready to do some serious work in the 119th Congress. It's one of the reasons that we like having him on, is because he understands, at least for me and my family, my dad, when all of the businesses left Americans' auto industry, its steel industry, iron industry, started heading out. Well, we're looking at possibly a new dawn for the American industrial age. Representative Perry, thanks for joining us.
Awesome to be with you. And of course, I grew up witnessing the exact same things that you just talked about. In central Pennsylvania, you go to any little town and there was some industry there. And over the course of my life, all that industry is left. Most of it is gone either to Asia or south of the border. I don't know how American policymakers say that they support America when they do they support policies that have resulted in that, right? And they said, well, we don't want to do that kind of work. We're going to do other things. Well, right now we can't afford groceries. You can't afford to pay your electricity bill. And, you can barely afford to take your family out for a meal on a weekend evening. How did all this make us better?
So let's talk about the kind of the flip side now, because now the 119th Congress is in session. Now we're getting some bills put out there. Of course, the Laken Riley Act made it through. We talked about that today a little bit with Senator Ted Cruz. We've talked about some legislation that he's getting ready to put forward on the Senate side. What are you doing in the House to actually get some legislation moving to revive those of us in this economy in the Rust Belt?
Well, among other things, one of the things we're tired of paying high prices for is energy.
Right.
And that's energy in your gas tank. That is energy in your fuel oil tank for heat. That's your electricity bill in the summertime when you're trying to turn the air conditioner on. And of course, the Democrat left-wing agenda against American energy is unbridled. You know that the current president just sequestered a whole bunch more federal land on the continental shelf, said no more drilling for oil in America, so we have to buy it from Venezuela or Iran or somebody like that. All that does is increase the price of every single thing that we do. So in particular, I've introduced 3 bills to stop subsidizing things that we don't want, whether it's the EV mandate, whether it's the ethanol mandate, things that destroy our engines and cost more money and are less efficient. We are sick of paying for those things. They don't fix anything, and they just raise our costs. Like I don't understand what the point is, but these are legacy programs that have a constituency in Washington, D.C. But my constituency isn't in Washington, D.C. And so at a minimum, that's what I'm working on. But the other thing that's big right now is this reconciliation package. And I'm just going to tell you that Washington, D.C., the swamp always wants its pound of flesh. And so what they're going to try and do is say, look, we're going to make sure that we save the tax cuts because none of us want to raise taxes. I don't want to raise taxes, but they're not going to be interested in cutting any spending because they want the same level of, programming and programmatic.
Right. Heads I win, tails you lose kind of stuff.
Right. And so they'll say, well, look, we'll fix all that we'll project, in this thing, we'll say that we're going to grow the economy by 4%. No, we're not going to grow the economy by 4%. Keep the tax cuts. Don't try the smoke and mirrors things. We have got to find savings at the federal level. We're spending over $2 trillion annually more than we take in. Quit trying to play hide the ball and let's get down to brass tacks and show me what programs we're actually going to cut. That's where I am. That's what I'm pushing.
Well, let's hop back to the conversation about unleashing American energy, because I can't help but notice that when President Biden in his last couple of days issues these blanket bans on expanding American energy, again, that energy still has to come from somewhere, and it also has to be produced by someone. It doesn't just come out of the ground packaged up in like a red jerry can. So I think of the American workers who might be working in these refineries, in these industries that are setting up pipelines, that are transporting the fuel, that are no longer going to be Americans. Instead, we're basically exporting to the workforces of these foreign governments who are not only treating their workers terribly, but they're scamming Americans in the process. And
that's exactly right. And I don't know when the last time America built a refinery. It might be like 20 years ago or something like that. These are good paying jobs because there's a level of risk associated with them. But the bigger point is that this is American energy that we control. We control our own destiny. We don't have to rely on somebody else. And these are kitchen table issues where you can go work at this place and come home, feed your family, go on vacation, buy a new vehicle, afford your child's education from the hard work you do supporting America and low prices and clean energy. No one does it better than the United States of America, and we don't need laws to force us to do that. We comply with the Paris Climate Accord, even though I don't think we should ever be involved in anything like that, but we comply without being in the Paris Climate Accord, and we're better than most other countries that are in the Paris Climate Accord just because our citizens demand that we do it cleanly and efficiently, and American ingenuity produces that. That's what we should be doing.
So if we're going to do that, then we actually have to dive into the kind of policies that unleash that. And this is where you're going to have all of the pundits come out to the table and say, well, it's day number 315 and I'm not seeing. And then they insert this kind of an artificial standard.
Yeah, right.
Pete Buttigieg, as the Secretary of Transportation, failed the instant he did not link the clenching of the American, or really the crushing of the American fuel economy with the supply chain. Because our entire supply chain relies on transporting goods via energy and through fossil fuels. I don't understand how people don't correlate. They don't actually connect lowering the cost of energy and therefore lowering the price of goods transporting them places.
That's exactly right. That energy production, America is an energy economy. It touches every single thing, that every single good or service that we're associated with. And so if energy prices go up, all your prices go up. It's universal. And so what, people oftentimes don't equate, you're plugging in an EV because there's some mandate in one of the states or there's subsidies or whatever, you're plugging that in. And instead of getting your fuel at the gas station, the fuel is coming from the power plant down the street. it's still fuel. And the real question is for people like Buttigieg or what have you. Look, if you want to buy an electric vehicle because that suits you're making short trips and you never really leave town or whatever, God bless you, go do it. And if you want to pay for that, God bless you, go do it. But I don't want to pay for it. I don't want to be forced to buy this stuff, and I don't want to be disallowed from buying what's right for me. This is America. We're not the mandate country. That's the Communist Party of China. That's Russia. That's North Korea. That's Iran. That's not us. Yet these people think they know better than all of you. They want to be pictured riding a bicycle to the office, even though as soon as the camera's gone, they get, they jump
back in the town car.
they jump back in the SUV, right? And they don't get why you're not down with that.
Right.
It's 25 degrees outside. Most people don't want to ride their bike 5 miles to do an office job.
But in Midwestern towns, all the way from Pennsylvania to Indiana to Wisconsin, they're putting these permanent bike lanes in town. Sorry, knowing that you're on the transportation and infrastructure committees, I just can't, in that context, it absolutely floors me how these winter-centric towns have bike lanes 24/7.
Well, so we have a place to put the snow, right? And then what we have is congestion because there's not enough lane miles to get the cars moved through. But for goodness sakes, we got a bike lane, and we can't afford the highways that we have now. Since you mentioned it, the surface transportation bill, what we call the IIJA right now, is I think $300 billion. We spent $250 billion subsidizing it from the general fund because we pay for things that we want to have, not for things that we need to have, like bridges and like lane miles. That's what we need to have. If you need to, look, I'm a bike rider too, but I ride on the side of the road.
I was going to say, sure, but I'm not obnoxious about it.
Right. I don't need my own lane. I can share the road.
We have all of these trails anyway for riding bikes, and everyone wants to pretend that they're in a Disney movie in the early aughts. I'm riding my bike to work. All right. Before we let you go, I know that you're also on the Oversight, Accountability, Intelligence Committees, very focused on foreign affairs over the next couple of years because the world is on fire after Biden and his dotted red line strategy hailing from Obama days, the don't.
Yeah.
What are you looking for here from an oversight and accountability perspective?
Well, from an oversight and accountability perspective, obviously, we're going to let the president lead. Weakness is provocative. I think we've seen the results of that weakness over the 4 years. From an oversight perspective, what we want to make sure is that, A, the people around the president are enacting his policies, right? We've seen the pushback from the perennial state around here, the perennial bureaucracy that just says, oh, yeah, well, Trump's here now, but in 4 years, he's going to be gone. I'm going to do what I want to do in the meantime, which is do, communist things. So we're going to be doing oversight on that. The other thing we're going to be doing oversight on is the money. How is the money being spent? Americans don't want their tax money to be spent to be working against the interest of the United States of America. But I will just tell you, it just came from a hearing where an organization gets a $315 million appropriation, but will not tell anybody where they send the grant money to. It's a black box, and they say, we don't have to tell anybody. And I asked the question, well, who's overseeing it?
Right.
And the answer was the agency is overseeing itself. Meanwhile, we know that they're censoring American ideas overseas. Americans don't want to pay for that, and we're not going to pay for that.
Well, hey, the classic line, we did an investigation and we have found that everything was above board is just my favorite.
Yeah.
Representative Scott Perry, Pennsylvania's 10th. Really appreciate you coming on, as always. Looking forward to seeing what you do with the 119th.
Awesome. Thank you. God bless you.
We'll be back in just a second. Don't go anywhere. This is the Tony Kinnett Cast here on the Daily Signal.
It's the Tony Kinnett Cast on 93 WIBC.
Welcome back to the Tony Kinnett Cast here on the Daily Signal. We've got Gabriella Hoffman. You know who she is. She's over from the Independent Women's Forum. She's doing all kinds of excellent stuff all the time regarding energy policy. And we could talk about old Doug Burgum, Bergie and the Black Eyed Peas heading into the Senate hearing and getting ready to unleash some energy from his Department of the Interior angle. Any thoughts on that when we're kind of skating through a ton of stuff?
Yeah, there's a lot to take from all the confirmation hearings. And I thought Chris Wright, who's going to lead energy, and then also Lee Zeldin. I caught a little bit of Lee Zeldin's hearing too. I thought all three of them did great under pressure.
On that, Scott Bessent as well regarding the energy race.
Yeah, in terms of Treasury, I thought his remarks were poignant. He understands that we're not in an energy transition, especially a clean energy transition. We're in a reliability era where reliability is a lot more important than virtue signaling on so-called clean energy, because everyone has seen here in the United States that clean energy is not necessarily reliable, cheap, or good for the environment either.
You're really right on the nose there. So that's stuff that we've got heading into the confirmation hearings. And just to be very clear with everyone, I've literally got suitcases over there packing up stuff for the DC show. I believe you're tuning in via a ball gown because we're just like rushing for Inauguration Day, all of the stuff going on. What else is on the docket? What do you have coming in the first couple of days that we should be expecting regarding energy?
I'm hearing from sources, and I mean published or people I've been talking with, that there is going to be a lot of day one actions, maybe first week actions of President-elect Trump, soon to be the 47th president, undoing a lot of Biden's directives. What I would hope to see done, especially with, obviously him undoing the EV mandates, the offshore oil and gas moratorium, it goes back further than that. There was that day one executive order by President Biden to basically say that climate posturing is going to be whole of government wide in every policy, every consideration. It's going to be in criteria for things that have nothing to do with energy and environment. So I hope he also undoes that. It was like January 27th, 2021 executive order. So that would essentially cancel everything else. That overarching executive order really did put us into this ESG, DEI, CRT posturing era. And I think we're going to see President Trump move away from this, especially across energy too, because all these ESG criteria, especially the emphasis on the E, net zero, climate, that really did put us in jeopardy in terms of our energy standing. We were not producing as much in terms of like conventional energy that is reliable. We saw a lot of gambling on solar and wind, which even with government subsidies were barely kept alive. Those industries, respective industries, almost collapsed. Subsidies aren't going to help keep them afloat. And the market and the public is moving away from embracing so-called renewables. They're pushing forward with nuclear. People want natural gas. Even the conversation of coal, Secretary-designate Burgum said that coal is going to make a comeback, and it's actually going to be essential for powering AI too, along with all this other electricity demand that is coming from these AI data centers. And then even beyond that, there's going to be just general demand for reliable, affordable, secure energy to power our grid, whether it's AI data centers or not. And these so-called renewables are not cutting it. It leads to more expensive utility bills, higher gas prices, energy just being more expensive than it needs to. And then we're also importing energy that is dirtier and not made with good labor because of Biden's policies, this insistence of we have to abide by climate posturing over reliability. So we've shrugged our leadership on the global stage. We're going to become energy dominant and embrace this abundance mindset, which is great. Abundance does not mean despoiling of the environment. It's going to be, I think, restoring back to balance. So we're going to see balance. We're going to see reliability, affordability, and sources that actually should be catalyzed, finally catalyzed. Nuclear is long overdue. We've talked about this before. To really see its day, I hope it does not get bogged down by government subsidies or stifled by further red tape, things of that sort. So the Trump presidency has to not take the same approach like Biden did, where you have to rely on government to shore up innovation, shore up viability in the market. It really has to be brought back to the private sector.
I mean, there really is so much to hit in the energy market. One of the worst examples of gaslighting that I saw, because as if there wasn't enough legitimate stuff for you and I to talk about that our listeners care about. We talked about this with Representative Scott Perry, that when you're looking at the supply chain and how that is completely dependent on fossil fuels and the energy economy, and therefore the prices of everything from the manufacturer to the store. I mean, that Senate Democrats would spend their entire confirmation hearings gaslighting over, well, China's going to beat us in green energy if we don't do green energy. And that's why I cited Secretary of the Treasury designee, good old Bessent heading in there. Why do these Democrats think, or these left-leaning individuals believe, they can get away with telling us that China and India are actually like super duper concerned about windmills and solar? Like, wink, wink, we promise, guys.
It really goes back to this wanting to be in a position of self-hatred, I think. And they can excuse China, for instance, of any wrongdoing, any use of slave labor for these rare earth elements, which they dominate in the processing and the harnessing side. So, China can have a blind eye placed towards it because they think that we can work with them, we could be a partner with them. But a lot of people are rightfully casting a very skeptical eye on China because it talks a great talk about climate, but what are they doing? They're building more coal plants. They're still double downing on fossil fuels, which nothing wrong with that. We should be doing that too. But to say that we will work with China if they just agree to climate posturing really makes them inconsistent under this net zero guideline that they like to follow. So it goes to show that net zero is not a practical or feasible solution if you could toss it out the window to bend the knee to China. So this is why a lot of people have said we prefer an administration that doesn't prioritize achieving net zero carbon emissions, which is an impossible goal to achieve, even if you were to pledge to reduce global temperatures by 2050 of 1.5 degrees Celsius. If you're lucky, you will only decrease at best 0.2 of a Celsius degree, all the while destroying the economy. So you don't benefit the environment by making these commitments in accordance with UN dictates here. So we sacrifice our economy and we don't even bolster the environment in doing so. So they are seen as hypocrites. Perhaps they're guilty about America having dominated in this space. And this is going to be something that President Trump has to wrestle with because he is making notes to China. I know on other issues, he's kind of having a not a double-edged sword, but kind of a both sidesing of China. Like he doesn't want to alienate them, but he doesn't want them to trample all over the United States. So he's taking a delicate kind of position with China. And I think he's going to be tough on China as he was before. But some people are worried, with things of TikTok. But I think on energy, he's not going to let China trample all over us, which is why he's making that gesture to acquire Greenland.
Marco Rubio talked about this a little bit. And I think that you and I have always been just right on the same wavelength regarding how the United States under the Trump administration views other countries of the world differently than the George W. Bush administration or the Obama administration or the Biden administration. And Rubio talked about this after the Cold War, we're just a global community, just shucksy doodlesing around the UN and we're all working together. And Trump doesn't see that. Trump sees a bunch of countries with their own interests. And that doesn't necessarily make them bad. That doesn't make them good. But they have interests and they're going to compete on the global stage. And when you're talking about energy, that's one of the primary mechanisms with which to compete. It's like direct access to the economy. I mean, how many dictatorships, Gabby, do we know of that are only viable on the world stage because of the energy they export?
That would be Russia, China, even Iran.
And Venezuela.
Largely because of that.
And like all of the other ones, even the ones that we sanction, then they go down for a little, they're still smuggling energy out. It's wild.
It really is. And I think, a lot of people say America first means, not working with our allies. What I am actually seeing in opposite is that Trump wants to work with the allies who have America's best interests at hand. I look to the Baltics, Lithuania, countries like that, where they're actually becoming energy independent too. They're fully divesting from Russia's electric grid. In early February, Lithuania is going to take that position, be the first in the EU to fully divest itself of Russian oil and gas, but also electric grid reliability and go into the EU grid and kind of, encourage others in the EU to say, hey, you are tough on Russia, supposedly act like it. And the United States is taking the same tone with Trump coming back in and pushing this energy dominance, energy abundance, energy independence mindset, because if we're producing more energy here, we're cutting our reliance on foreign adversaries or foreign countries who don't have the same practices, who don't have the same standards as us. And that puts our interests first. And then we can have all this liquid gold, as President Trump likes to call it, at our disposal that we can export to our friends in Europe and other countries that like us, and cut their dependence on Russian oil and gas, Venezuelan oil and gas, Iranian, oil supplies, things, OPEC even. And so it's a good thing. And it doesn't mean we're going to be alienating our allies. I think a lot of people conflate the two, but that's not what I see it as, because I think now with him coming back to office, you look at the foreign policy energy angle, when those two overlap, energy is a good bargaining chip. It's integral to life. And if we can lead by example and say, hey, we're going to be energy independent, other countries will look to us and say, much like Lithuania and other countries, Poland, I bet, is going to take a similar tack too, where they're going to say, we can look to the United States and have that and follow that example.
I got to tell you, that was probably one of the best summations of that tie-in from foreign policy to energy that I've heard in a very long time. This is why we have you on. Gabriella Hoffman from the Independent Women's Forum. It's really great to have you. Really appreciate the work that you guys are doing, and we'll have you back soon.
Yes, it would be good to chat. There's a lot of exciting moving parts coming through, and we'll keep tabs on the administration and help your listeners and viewers digest what's going on.
Well, hopefully without too much Alka-Seltzer. So we'll be back in just a second. Don't go anywhere. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast. Mail time. Mail time. Mail time.
On the Tony Kinnett Cast.
All right, let's dig into some of this good old-fashioned mail time. We've got some questions from some different viewers this week that are perhaps a little bit more interesting than I was expecting. So we'll start on the more serious side, and we'll take it down as we go. So first of all, this is from Ellis. So Trump will be inheriting an inflation rate that is the highest in 5 months. What can he do to stop another rise in inflation? Well, there are two answers here. Number one, the best answer for decreasing a rising inflation rate is to stop massive spending. Now, the problem with the Trump administration up ahead is that he's not going to be cutting any entitlements, and that is still a massive ballooning problem. Trump's plan is to try to build the economy to outgrow the deficit, which it's quite a sizable task. In the interim, what can he do? It's stop a couple of measures like allowing the interest rates to go a little bit lower and kind of create an artificial sense of recovering from inflation. There are a couple of things that are kind of ticking time bombs down on the pike that the Biden administration and Jerome Powell have, especially Janet Yellen, haven't quite set up maybe as smoothly as they had hoped that it was going to trip Trump up. Whether inflation does or does not skyrocket in the next year really depends on how Trump is able to leverage newer international trade deals. I think it's very likely that happens, but it's not a guarantee. Those are kind of the ways that I think that Trump can best address inflation in the short term. Now, is that my preferred means of addressing inflation? No, I think that having a currency that is built on kind of a balance of the GDP and the national debt is a very tenuous thing. The currency should be built on a metallic or a tangible standard. Otherwise, it's just a promissory note towards something that is movable. And, that's an issue for a number of reasons. Jay asks, if you had to leave Indiana, because I am a very pro-Indiana kind of host, though this is a national show these days. If you had to leave Indiana, where would you go? My wife and I have actually talked about this quite a bit. The easy answer that a lot of people give is Texas, Florida as well. I don't think that either Florida or Texas, great states though they are probably where my heart is drawn. A lot of my family comes from the Commonwealth of Kentucky, Tennessee. Also, I grew up loving Dale Hollow. I guess aside from that though, if I had to pick a place to go that wasn't Indiana, it would be northern Idaho. The Pacific Northwest that is not Seattle and Portland is just breathtaking country. Moscow, Idaho, Coeur d'Alene, phenomenal places. Western Montana, just some of the most breathtaking country, as far as I'm concerned, on earth. And if I had to leave my sweet, precious Hoosier heartland, that's probably where I'd end up. This next question is from McSkees. Respect the unusual name there, my dude. He says, I've seen you talking a lot online about conquering Illinois. What's that about? So being the Hoosier nationalist that I am, and that I would love to see the state of Indiana be the Indiana Republic and stretch throughout the entire Ohio River Basin, which I do believe is indeed our birthright, that the Indiana territory should stretch on its eastern border, the Allegheny Mountains, and its western border, the Mississippi River, that this beautiful republic should envelop quite a few neighbors. Now, most of that's a joke because there's a lot of fun in picking at other states in the Midwest. there's just Illinois and Indiana pick at each other, Ohio and Michigan pick at each other. Everyone just kind of, turns up their nose at Minnesota. Wisconsin is there. The true Midwest in this country, there's just, again, Notre Dame and Ohio are in the college football championships. There is just a rivalry that exists between them, and therefore it's fun to make fun of them. It's fun to make fun of Ohio. It's easy to make fun of Michigan. Illinois sucks because of Chicago. At the very least, would I love to see Indiana take all of Illinois and then push Chicago into the Great Lakes to slowly sink to the bottom? Absolutely. And you know what? If the journos here in Indiana want to take that seriously and suggest I'm threatening Illinois, all I have to say is better watch your back, Illinois, because we're coming. So that moving along, one of the most unserious, just kind of a weird question that I think I've ever gotten on the show. Kind of had to double check when this one was sent to me. This is from a guy who I think has more emojis and symbols in his name, which is very fitting of the question. He says, when people gripe about you online, that's not exactly what he says, but we're going to kind of modify it just a bit here. When people gripe about you online, is there a particular physical feature that they go after? I've never had a question like that. There is an answer to this, absolutely. The answer is on my teeth right here. This particular tooth right next to the front teeth is back just a little bit. I never got braces because I didn't want braces. And even as an adult, I got like Invisalign for like 1 week as a teacher, and I hated the lisp it gave me so much, I just got rid of them. So I have one tooth that is slightly to the back of them, and that has been pointed out by those who are very angry at me, which I guess is a good thing. If they're not actually picking apart things that I'm saying, if they're not articulating what it is that I'm saying is wrong, or the ideas that are, badly sourced or cited or inarticulate, whatever they may be, I'll take the tooth thing. There was a weird rumor that I actually got to ask the individual in person about who brought it up. There was a rumor going around that I was 5'2", which is, honest to goodness, one of the better rumors that I've heard because it is so instantly disprovable. As much as I guess calling me short might indeed be funny, I'm a very standard, basic, average 6'2". Not like I'm 6'2". I mean, it's like right on the license. Just very basic standard, not aggressively tall, not short. I'm just here. And so some of the online rumors and things, but I think that people take, too much stock in some of the online insults that they receive. Not because I don't think online insults are funny. Online insults are hilarious. Cyberbullying is one of the funniest things that's ever been conceived by man. That you could actually shut off harassment by turning off the computer is just a level of self-fulfilling prophecy and self-anger that I've never quite gotten over, just being hilarious. People who, you get into the broadcasting game, there's always going to be things that people point out, but that was an interesting one. I have on purpose not looked at the comments section while reading that question, because the thought of some of the interesting people in the live chat section who pay attention when I take my glasses off, the idea that they are now scrutinizing my facial features up close, I'm not particularly looking forward to after the show. But what I am looking forward to after the show, because I'm so good at segues, is our Inauguration Day coverage. It's coming up on Monday. I get up at like 4 a.m. tomorrow. We're going to fly out to DC and get set up. A lot of great parties and galas. And yes, indeed, the greatest of balls and meetings and events that one could fathom. We're getting a huge conservative, Republican, libertarian-leaning crew out to DC. It's going to be a blast. 10:30 a.m. on Monday is when our live coverage starts. We have some phenomenal guests on the line, including a conversation I'm really looking forward to with the legendary pollster Scott Rasmussen, and a great overview of Trump's meteoric return from the lowest of the low in 2020, facing down 4 indictments and 2 assassination attempts, to returning as the 47th president of the United States with me, J.D. Vance, his vice president. And as someone who is very clearly J.D. Vance of Ohio, the Ohio is the hardest part of that to say. I'm really looking forward to the next administration, and I hope that you are as well. Those of you who have only ever listened to the show and you don't actually watch it on TV or the live streams, you've got no idea what joke I just made. That's totally fine. So we'll be back sooner rather than later. Have a wonderful weekend. Get a lot of rest. If you're in DC, give us a holler. This is the Tony Kinnett Cast here on the Daily Signal, nationally syndicated and still first on 93 WIBC.